7 days before Christmas, my husband looked me straight in the eyes, completely calm, like he was telling me something small and ordinary, and said that this year he and his daughter would be spending the holidays with his ex-wife, because in his words, their child needed to grow up with a real example of a mother. And I remember standing there for a second longer than I should have, trying to understand if I heard him correctly, because somehow, in that entire sentence, there was no space for me at all. And the worst part wasn't even how he said it was how normal he made it sound, like this was something obvious, something already decided, something I was simply expected to accept without asking questions. I've been married to Daniel for 4 years, and from the outside, our life probably looks stable, even happy, because we have a home, routines, a little boy who still believes in Christmas magic, and his daughter from his first marriage, Emma, who's been part of my daily life for as long as I've been with him, even though I've always felt like I was standing slightly outside of something I was trying really hard to belong to. I never tried to replace her mother. I never even came close to crossing that line because I understood that she already had won, but I showed up in every way that mattered, in the quiet ways that don't get noticed unless they disappear, early school mornings, packing lunches, helping with homework, sitting through her stories, even when she barely looked at me, because I thought that over time, consistency would mean something. But there was always this distance, not loud, not aggressive, just quiet and constant, like I was tolerated rather than accepted, like I was part of the structure, but never really part of the family. His ex-wife, Laura, was never openly hostile, but she had this way of existing just outside the frame while still controlling it, like everything somehow revolved around her without her needing to say it out loud, and Daniel always made space for that. Every time something felt off, every time I tried to explain that I felt pushed aside, that I felt like I was competing with a past that never really ended, he would say the same thing, over and over again, that she is still Emma's mother, and that some things are simply more important than feelings. And for a long time, I convinced myself that maybe he was right, that maybe this was just part of being in a blended family, that maybe discomfort was something you just learned to live with. I started planning Christmas weeks in advance, because I wanted this year to feel different. I wanted it to feel like we were finally a real family, not something divided into pieces. So I decorated the house, bought gifts for both kids. Imagine the morning where our son would wake up early and run to the tree, and maybe, just maybe, Emma would feel like she belonged here too. That's why when he said it, when he told me he was taking her to his ex-wife's house for Christmas, it didn't just feel like a decision. It felt like everything I had been trying to build quietly fell apart in one sentence. And if you think that was the worst part, it wasn't, because what he said next made it very clear that this had nothing to do with the holiday itself. He said that Emma needs to see what a real mother looks like, and I swear I felt something shift inside me in that exact moment, because if she is the real one, then what exactly am I? I asked him what that meant for our son, for the family we live in every single day, and he just shrugged slightly. Like the answer was obvious, like this wasn't even a question worth discussing. He told me I wouldn't understand because I'm not her real mother, and that this is something Emma needs, even if it makes me uncomfortable. And the way he said it, so casually, so final, made it clear that my feelings were not just secondary, they were irrelevant. And for a second, I actually questioned myself, like maybe I was overreacting, maybe I was being too sensitive, maybe I was making something bigger than it really was, until I remembered something he did a few months ago, something I tried very hard to ignore at the time. He had canceled our plans last minute, said Laura needed help with something, and when I asked why it couldn't wait, he looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable, like I was asking him to choose between being a good father and being a good husband. And that should have been my first real red flag. Because now, standing there, listening to him explain why spending Christmas with his ex-wife made perfect sense, I realized that this wasn't a one-time decision. This was a pattern I had been refusing to see. He started talking about details after that, actual plans, times, how long they would stay, like everything was already set, like I was just expected to stay home and accept it, like I didn't even need to be included in the conversation. And I wish I could say that this is the moment where I stood up for myself, where I said no, where I made it clear that this wasn't okay, but the truth is, I didn't. Because I didn't know yet what was coming next. And if I had known what I was about to find out the night before Christmas, something he never planned for me to know, something that would completely change the way I see him, his ex, and everything I thought our marriage was built on, I wouldn't have stayed quiet. Not even for a second. He left on Christmas morning like it was nothing, kissed our son on the head, grabbed his bag and walked out the door with Emma, and I stood there holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, staring at the tree I spent weeks decorating for a family that clearly didn't include me the way I thought it did. I didn't call him, I didn't text, I didn't ask how it was going, because something in me already knew that whatever was happening there had nothing to do with me anymore. And the silence between us that day wasn't empty, it was loud. He came back late the next evening, not apologetic, not distant enough to raise immediate suspicion, just slightly off in a way that only someone who knows you too well would notice, avoiding eye contact for half a second too long, answering questions just a little too quickly, keeping his phone turned face down like it suddenly mattered more than before. And the scariest part wasn't what I saw, it was how familiar it felt. I told myself I was imagining things, that this was just the after effect of what he said before Christmas, that I was looking for problems because I had already been hurt, but doubt doesn't come out of nowhere, and neither does that quiet instinct that something is wrong. I didn't go through his phone that night or the next day because part of me still wanted to believe there was nothing to find. But a few days later, he left it on the kitchen counter while he went to take a shower, and I wasn't planning to look. I really wasn't until it lit up. It was one message, one name. It was Laura. And I don't even know what made me pick it up. Maybe curiosity, maybe exhaustion, maybe the fact that deep down I already knew what I was about to see. It wasn't long conversations or obvious confessions. It was worse because it was casual, comfortable, familiar in a way that doesn't happen overnight. Short messages that carried history inside them. Jokes I didn't understand, references to things I was never part of, and a tone that was way too intimate for two people who were supposed to be over. And right there, in that moment, everything became clear without needing a single explicit word. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was something that had already been happening. And suddenly, Christmas made perfect sense. The trip, the explanation, the way he said real mother like it was a justification instead of an insult. It wasn't about Emma, it wasn't about parenting, it was about them. And I just didn't see it in time. I didn't cry, I didn't confront him immediately. I just stood there holding his phone, feeling this strange, quiet clarity settle in, like my brain had finally stopped trying to protect me from something it already knew. And that's when I realized something even worse. I had been adjusting myself for a long time to fit into a situation that was never built for me in the first place. The next morning, I didn't ask him anything, I didn't start a fight. I just got in my car and drove. Not to clear my head, not to calm down, but to hear it directly. From her. I drove there without music, without thinking, without even fully processing what I was about to do, because at that point I wasn't looking for explanations anymore. I just needed confirmation, something real and undeniable that would finally match the feeling that had been building inside me for longer than I wanted to admit. When she opened the door, she didn't look surprised to see me standing there. She didn't ask why I came. She didn't pretend this was unexpected, and that alone told me more than any conversation could have. For a second, we just stood there in silence, looking at each other like two people who already knew exactly what the other one was about to say, and I realized I didn't even need to prepare anything, because there was nothing left to protect. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I didn't ask questions in circles. I just said it directly. Asked her if there was something going on between her and my husband, and I watched her face carefully, waiting for even the smallest hesitation. But it never came. She didn't deny it, didn't deflect, didn't try to soften it or make it sound complicated. She just said yes, like it was a simple fact, like something that didn't require explanation or justification. And in that moment, I thought that was the part that would break me, hearing it out loud, hearing someone confirm the thing I had been trying not to believe, but somehow it didn't. Because what she said next was worse. She looked at me calmly, almost casually, and told me that this wasn't some emotional story, not something meaningful, not something she was trying to turn into a relationship again, and that she had no intention of getting back together with him, because she didn't want that life anymore. And then she said it, that it was just an affair, just something that happens, just something temporary. And I don't know how to explain it, but in that exact moment, everything inside me shifted, because suddenly this wasn't about betrayal in the way I imagined it. It wasn't about him choosing her over me because he loved her more. It was about him risking everything we had for something that didn't even matter to the other person involved. He didn't destroy our family for love. He did it for something meaningless. And that realization was colder than any kind of heartbreak. I didn't argue with her. I didn't ask for details. I didn't try to understand how long it had been going on or who started it, because none of that would change the only thing that actually mattered. He chose this. It was repeatedly and consciously. And I was the only one who didn't know. So I left. Not dramatically, not in anger, not with tears or raised voices. I just turned around and walked away, because there was nothing left there for me to fight for, nothing left to fix, nothing left that still belonged to me. When I got back home, he was sitting in the living room like everything was normal, like nothing had changed, like he was still part of a life that I now understood had already ended without me realizing it. He asked me where I had been, and for the first time, I didn't try to explain myself, didn't try to keep the peace, didn't try to make things easier for him. I just told him I knew. And the look on his face wasn't shock. It was fear. Not of losing me, but of being exposed. And that told me everything I needed to know. He tried to talk, tried to explain, tried to turn it into something complicated, something emotional, something that could be discussed or repaired, but I didn't stay to listen because I had already heard the only truth that mattered. It was just an affair. And if that's all it took for him to walk away from everything we built, then there was nothing left for me to hold on to. I packed what I needed, I took my son, and I left that house without looking back, because staying would have meant accepting a version of my life where I was always second to something that wasn't even real. And the most ironic part of all of this is that he went there on Christmas to show his daughter what a real mother looks like. But in the end, I was the only one who showed what real self-respect actually is. And after that, I never went back. Am I wrong for walking away? Or would you have done the same? Would you forgive this if they said it was just an affair? Be honest, is this cheating worse than emotional betrayal?